Have you ever wondered if our favorite pink-haired sorcerer could defeat the real-world army? Me too! How would Modulo Yuji, the strongest version of Yuji and an absolute superhuman powerhouse, fare against modern weaponry like advanced fighter jets, heavily armored tanks, or literal bunker-busting bombs? And maybe the most important question of all, what would happen to him when the military stops playing fair, throws the Geneva Convention out the window, and breaks out the absolute heaviest hitters in their classified arsenal? Well, in order to answer those massive questions that you've been having apparently, I split the military's sheer destructive power into 8 different levels. And with each new level, the army gets a huge exponential increase in destructive power, abandoning standard infantry tactics to treat Yuji like a walking, breathing Avengers-level threat. So, let's first see exactly how many levels Yuji can pass by just using his pure cursed energy reinforcement, his insane combat instincts, and his raw physical stats. And at the end of the video, we'll see if he can actually survive the absolute pinnacle of human weaponry. Now guys, realistically speaking though, matching an absolute powerhouse like Modulo Yuji against the United States military requires abandoning standard ground tactics immediately. This ain't your average Tuesday deployment. Sending in regular troops with M4 assault rifles and standard frag grenades would be a complete waste of taxpayer dollars. Those weapons, they won't even scratch his cursed energy reinforcement. They would just bounce off his skin and tickle him like he's Superman. So guys, to actually damage Yuji, the military has to exploit his fundamental, unavoidable weakness. Despite his monstrous, building-shattering strength, he is still a biological human being. He needs oxygen to breathe. He relies on a fragile nervous system to move. And ultimately, he operates within the strict bounds of physics. In the very first level, Yuji would face off against specialized, highly trained sniper units. And we aren't talking about standard infantrymen hiding behind sandbags. As we established, standard 5.56mm bullets would literally bounce right off of Yuji's skin like Nerf darts. The generals sitting in the war room eating their donuts watching drone footage of this pink-haired teenager jogging through the war zone would realize this instantly. So the military quickly upgrades their arsenal to 20mm anti-material sniper rifles. And guys, these are absolute behemoths of weapons, like the Anzio 20mm, firing rounds that are literally the size of hot dogs. So the military sets up 2 multiple 2-man sniper teams, positioning them in reinforced vantage points 2 to 3 miles away from Yuji's location, hoping to catch them completely off guard. Now, why would this specific weapon damage our boy when normal guns fail? Well, a 20mm round isn't meant for people. It is specifically designed to completely destroy light tanks, penetrate thick armored personnel carriers, and rip straight through reinforced concrete bunkers. Even if Yuji's dense cursed energy reinforcement manages to stop the actual bullet from physically piercing his skin and entering his bloodstream, the sheer kinetic energy transfer, we're talking about over 65,000 foot-pounds of raw devastating force, would be like getting hit by a literal freight train. But concentrated though, entirely into a single square inch of his body. It would cause massive debilitating blunt force trauma, deep tissue bruising, and potential bone fractures even if he takes it squarely to the chest while fully braced. But let's be totally real here for a second. Yuji's incredibly fast. We are talking about a guy capable of reacting to supersonic attacks, dodging piercing blood projectiles, and keeping pace with some of the fastest curses in existence. The moment he senses the hostility in the air, or the millisecond he hears the supersonic crack of the rifles echoing through the city, his battle instincts take over. Y'all, he's closing that 2-mile distance at speeds that would make a high-end sports car look like a rusty tricycle. Then, using the urban environment to his advantage, he leaps across entire city blocks, his feet shattering the asphalt with every single step. He bounds up the sides of skyscrapers, landing directly in the hidden sniper nests. Before the highly trained operatives can even chamber a second round, Yuji dismantles the entire squad with a few casual restrained kicks, shattering their incredibly expensive rifles into 100 pieces. What a waste of tax dollars. But the snipers realize way too late that distance means absolutely nothing to a kid who can jump several stories into the air from a complete standstill. Realizing the opponent is much stronger and way faster than they originally thought, the army immediately adds a second wanted level to his name. The generals in the war room and their yummy donuts are starting to sweat through their uniforms. They realize that you can't just shoot a guy who actively crushes solid concrete with his bare hands and treats sniper fire like a mild annoyance. And so, if physical projectiles won't work, they need to attack his human senses. They roll out the non-lethal but incredibly brutal Crowd Control Division, Active Denial System, and LRADs, long-range acoustic devices. Mounted on heavily armored riot-controlled trucks surrounding Yuji's general perimeter, these weapons don't fire bullets, they fire raw physics. Because guess what? This isn't Call of Duty. You can't just punch a sound wave out of the air. The LRAD emits highly focused, invisible beams of sound pushing well past the 160 decibel mark. So for a terrifying bit of context, that is loud enough to instantly burst a normal human's eardrums, as well as completely scramble their internal equilibrium and drop them to their knees in agonizing, dizzying, nauseating pain. Then alongside this auditory nightmare, the active denial system, it fires millimeter wave beams that completely penetrate the target's skin and rapidly heats the water molecules inside of the body. It tricks the nervous system into making the target feel like they are literally submerged in a vat of boiling lava without actually setting them on fire. Now, Yuji's immense physical durability and his thick layer of cursed energy might protect his bones, muscles, and vital organs from being crushed, but it doesn't do a single thing to protect his delicate inner ear balance or his raw biological nerve receptors. The invisible heat ray makes his skin practically smoke, and the localized sound wave threatens to instantly knock him unconscious, causing his vision to blur and the world to spin wildly around him. But here's the thing that the military didn't account for. Yuji's pain intolerance is insane, yo! We are talking about a kid who has had his fingers sliced off, half his torso brutally gouged out, his liver ruptured, and multiple broken bones in a single fight, and he still kept throwing heavy punches like nothing happened. Gritting his teeth through the blinding, searing pain and the deafening ringing in his ears, Yuji forces his body to move. He covers his bleeding ears with heavily CE-reinforced arms, locks his furious eyes on the source of the invisible attacks, and simply reaches down to the street. He rips a literal parked car out of the asphalt and throws it directly into the heavily armored LRAD trucks, completely shattering the multi-million-dollar sensory grid in a single explosive crash. Okay, so the first two levels were pretty much a light warm-up for our resident demon vessel, but the third level is where the military stops caring about collateral damage completely. The sexy little generals look at the shattered trucks and the unharmed teenager, and they authorize the unthinkable. If they can't shoot him with giant bullets, and they can't stun him with sound and heat, they're going to try to burn him into an absolute crisp using highly restricted chemical warfare. Enter White Phosphorus, affectionately and terrifyingly known by the military as Willie Pete. Fired from massive artillery howitzers stationed miles away in a secure base, the sky above Yuji suddenly turns blindingly bright white before raining down an inescapable chemical firestorm. White phosphorus is the stuff of nightmares, and it also might be a war crime. It burns at a blistering 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit or 2,760 Celsius. But the temperature isn't even the worst part. It ignites instantly upon contact with the oxygen in the air, and it fiercely, stubbornly sticks to absolutely anything it touches. Yuji, he can't just brush it off like a normal fire, and if he tries to smother it with water from a broken fire hydrant, it only chemically reacts and burns even hotter. It is specifically designed by military scientists to burn completely through clothing, skin, muscle, and eventually bone. Furthermore, the resulting thick, choking white smoke is highly toxic, severely damaging the respiratory system and melting the lungs from the inside, even if a small amount is inhaled. So as the sky literally rains liquid fire, Yuji is caught right in the middle of a literal inescapable inferno. His cursed energy instantly flares up to protect him, acting as a barrier, but the sticky phosphorus clings to his iconic uniform, burning straight through the tough fabric and threatening to eat into his flesh. So to survive this chemical hell, Yuji has to make a split-second, incredibly painful decision. He forcefully rips off his burning clothes, sacrificing his outer layers and suffering minor burns in the process, and uses his monstrous leg strength to propel himself out of the blast radius entirely. He holds his breath, keeping his eyes narrowed to slits, navigating blindly through the toxic blinding smoke, and blasts out of the danger zone just before the chemical fire can eat through his rapidly depleting CE defenses. He survives, bursting out of the smoke cloud into the air, but he is panting heavily, slightly burned, covered in soot, and definitely incredibly angry. And also, guys, I just want to say, if you don't want the US military to secretly track your IP address and come after you at night, you should really consider hitting that subscribe button right now. Anyways, we reach the fourth wanted level. The military finally brings in the heavy armor. They realize Yuji is too fast for artillery and too tough for infantry. I'm talking about a synchronized, highly coordinated firing squad of heavily armored M1 Abrams tanks, rumbling through the ruined city streets, tracking Yuji through the lingering dust and chemical smoke via advanced military-grade thermal imaging. And y'all, let's get one thing straight though. They aren't shooting standard explosive shells. They are firing what is known as 120mm APF SDS rounds, or armor-piercing fin-stabilized discarding sabot. But these aren't your grandpa's old-school TIG shells that just blow up when they hit a wall. These are essentially massive, incredibly dense, depleted uranium darts flying through the air at Mach 5. That is 5 times the sound of speed, by the way. When depleted uranium hits a highly durable, resistant target, by the way, it doesn't flatten out like lead or shatter like steel. What it actually does is it self-sharpens upon impact and spontaneously ignites due to the sheer terrifying kinetic friction. If Yuji tries to stand completely still and tank this head-on with his arms crossed like an anime protagonist, the immense speed, the ridiculous density of the uranium, and the superheated friction would easily pierce straight through his cursed energy reinforcement, rip him entirely in half, and keep going for another mile. But Yuji isn't here to aura farm. When the tank locks on and fires, Yuji relies completely on his superhuman, borderline precognitive reflexes and the sudden, violent violent spark of cursed energy that warns his brain of immense fatal danger. The Sabo rounds fly at the speed of sound, shattering the concrete where Yuji just stood a microscopic millisecond prior. The sheer wind pressure of the passing rounds slices through the surrounding buildings, cutting them in half. Using his incredible parkour skills and ridiculous gravity-defying agility, Yuji uses the crumbling urban environment to his absolute advantage. He leaps from concrete debris, perfectly timing his jumps, and lands directly on top of the lead Abrams tank. He pulls his fist back, channeling every ounce of his rage and cursed energy into his knuckles. With a resounding, reality-bending spark of black lightning, Yuji unleashes a devastating black flash. The spatial distortion completely caves in the supposedly impenetrable reinforced armor of the tank, sending localized shockwaves deep into the earth that violently flip the million-dollar war machines completely upside down like discarded toys. What a waste of tax dollars. And now, seeing their multi-million-dollar tanks turned into useless scrap metal by a teenager with pink hair throwing punches, the US military rapidly pivots their strategy. Now, if a ground assault is basically a glorified suicide mission that only wastes their budget and your money, they need to take the fight to the skies. At level 5, the battlefield suddenly goes completely eerily silent. The tanks stop rolling, the artillery stops firing. Cruising completely invisibly at 25,000 feet up in the cold stratosphere is a highly classified Reaper drone. And its payload? The infamous, terrifying R9X Ninja Bomb, a heavily modified AGM-114 Hellfire missile. This weapon is utterly terrifying, specifically because it doesn't explode. There is no fire, no massive shockwave, and no warning. Instead, just seconds before impact, it deploys 6 massive spring-loaded razor-sharp steel blades from its fuselage. It relies entirely on sheer kinetic mass, weighing well over 100 pounds and traveling straight down towards the earth well past the speed of sound, to slice its target into literal bloody ribbons. It's designed to silently penetrate heavily armored roofs or car chassis and crush, dice, and eradicate the target inside without leaving a massive blast radius that would harm civilians. The true danger here is that Yuji is incredibly fast, yes, but he can't easily dodge what he doesn't know is falling from the literal stratosphere. Now, as the silent, bladed missile descends, breaking the sound barrier without a whisper, Yuji is calmly walking through the burning wreckage of the tanks, catching his breath. Then, at the very last possible conceivable microsecond, his seasoned battle instincts and the raw, turbulent flow of his cursed energy scream at his nervous system to move. He doesn't even look up, his body just reacts. The missile strikes the pavement, deploying its massive whirring blades. Yuji dives violently to the side, but the sheer blinding speed of the weapon grazes him, slicing a deep, bleeding gash right into his arm and completely obliterating the street behind him into a massive, terrifyingly precise crater of sliced concrete and shredded steel. Yuji looks up at the empty sky, wiping the blood from his arm, finally realizing the attacks are coming from enemies he can't even see, miles above the clouds. He realizes he can never stop moving. He has to stay constantly on the run, sprinting at top speed through the ruined city, desperately dodging supersonic, sword-wielding blender missiles raining silently from the heavens. Okay, gang, this is the exact moment where the kid gloves come completely off and the military stops playing by any known rules of engagement. The military sees that Yuji is somehow outrunning their precision orbital strikes and surviving their chemical baths, so they decide to stop targeting his body directly. Instead, they are going to start targeting the very air he breathes. Level 6 brings out the terrifying, lung-crushing thermobaric weapons, also ominously known in the military world as fuel-air explosives, or vacuum bombs. A squadron of supersonic fighter jets streaks across the sky, dropping these devastating, specialized munitions right into the center of the urban grid where Yuji is currently sprinting. Now, why does this specific type of bomb damage Yuji when high-explosive tank shells and heavy sniper fire couldn't even slow him down? Because a thermobaric bomb completely and utterly bypasses external physical durability. When it drops into the city, it don't just blow up. First, it disperses a massive invisible cloud of highly flammable, volatile aerosol across the entire city block. It seeps into every alleyway, building, and crevice. Then, a split second later, a secondary charge violently ignites it. So this creates a colossal, rapidly expanding fireball that literally sucks absolutely all of the surrounding oxygen out of the atmosphere to rapidly fuel the blast. So the resulting overpressure wave? A massive, inescapable vacuum effect. It doesn't just push you backwards, it violently rips the air straight out from your lungs. Did you even know that stuff like this existed? It causes hollow internal organs to instantly rupture and hemorrhage from the inside out due to the extreme change in atmospheric pressure. Remember, again, Yuji is superhuman, but he absolutely needs oxygen to survive. As the first thermobaric bomb goes off, Yuji feels the air completely terrifyingly vanish from his lungs. The atmospheric pressure drops so incredibly rapidly that his eardrums pop and begin to bleed. Realizing he is actively suffocating on dry land and his internal organs are being mercilessly squeezed squeezed by a localized vacuum, Yuji has to push his physical limits to the absolute razor edge maximum. He holds whatever tiny fraction of breath he has left in his system, powerfully reinforces his internal organs with every single ounce of cursed energy he possesses to stop them from bursting, and then leaps desperately out of the vacuum zone just as his vision starts to go dark and spotty. He lands several miles away, crashing into a building, violently gasping for sweet air, incredibly battered, bruised, and bleeding from his nose and his ears. We have now officially reached the 7th wanted level, and the United States military is in a state of absolute unadulterated sheer panic. Russia never did this, I don't think. The president is on the phone. Standard explosive bombs didn't work. Chemical fire didn't work. Lethal vacuum bombs barely managed to slow him down. So they call in the heavy, lumbering transport planes to drop the legendary GBU-43B Moab, the mother of all bombs. This is the absolute, undisputed, most powerful non-nuclear weapon in the entire US military arsenal, packed with an apocalyptic explosion equivalent to exactly 11 tons of pure TNT. But because they are dealing with Yuji Itadori, and hopefully at least one of the generals reads the manga, they don't just drop one and call it a day. To absolutely make sure he doesn't try to escape underground, hide in a subway station, or take shelter inside of a heavily reinforced skyscraper, they simultaneously authorize the drop of GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator. This is a 30,000-pound precision-guided bunker buster explicitly designed to forcefully burrow through 200 feet of solid packed earth and 60 feet of reinforced concrete before finally exploding. So now, the Moab airbursts directly above Yuji's exact location, lighting up the sky like a second sun. The immediate blast radius is exactly 1 mile wide of pure, unadulterated destruction. It sends an apocalyptic, rippling shockwave downwards that instantly flattens absolutely everything in its path, instantly turning towering skyscrapers to fine dust and vaporizing the asphalt streets. Yuji is caught right in the dead center epicenter. He crosses his arms in front of his face, planting his feet deep into the ground, and pours every single drop of cursed energy he has into his defensive guard. The sheer ambient heat is enough to effortlessly melt steel beams, and the concussive, deafening shockwave traveling through the solid ground threatens to completely liquefy his internal organs despite his CE reinforcement. The sheer, overwhelming force of the dual explosion completely buries Yuji deep under hundreds of thousands of tons of concrete, steel, and rubble. For a long, tense moment in the war room, the military thinks they finally did it. The choking dust slowly settles, the ruined city is a flat, unrecognizable wasteland, and everything is completely quiet. But then, the mountain of rubble violently shifts with a massive primal roar that echoes across the wasteland. Yuji completely bursts from his concrete tomb, sending massive boulders flying into the air. His clothes are completely gone, his skin is severely scorched, his muscles are screaming in agony, and he is bleeding heavily from severe head wounds. But his eyes are still burning brightly with that undeniable, unstoppable determination. He refuses to die. Okay, guys, this is it. The end of the line. The final, absolute worst-case apocalyptic scenario. The US military, watching the satellite feeds in absolute horror, realizes that conventional kinetic impact and explosive force will never be enough to put Yuji Itadori into the ground for good. His willpower and cursed energy are just too stubborn. So the president grimly opens the nuclear briefcase, and the military fully authorizes Level 8, the Doomsday Protocol. First, before they go nuclear, they deploy something incredibly, disgustingly sinister: VX nerve gas, heavily restricted by multiple international treaties and considered a crime against humanity. The military drops silent chemical cluster bombs to completely flood Yuji's entire zip code in an invisible, odorless, and highly lethal synthetic gas. And my friends, here is the horrifying, unavoidable reality of this situation. Cursed energy does not act as a biological air filter for microscopic toxins. It protects against physical trauma, not chemistry. VX is an incredibly potent acetylcholine esterase inhibitor. A single microscopic drop of this liquid on Yuji's skin, or a single shallow breath of the invisible gas, causes the human nervous system to violently, uncontrollably misfire. Because Yuji is so physically strong, the gas would brutally force his superhuman muscles to instantly lock up in fatal, bone-breaking convulsions, snapping his own limbs from the tension, followed rapidly by complete, agonizing asphyxiation as his diaphragm completely paralyzes. But for the sake of the argument, let's just say Yuji's superhuman biology, aided by his time as Sukunists vessel, gave him just enough innate poison resistance to stumble out of the lethal gas cloud. He is coughing up blood, his vision is entirely black, his muscles are tearing themselves apart, and he is barely clinging to his life. The military, though, doesn't take any chances whatsoever. They want absolute certainty. The sky suddenly parts, and a Minuteman III intercontinental ballistic missile descends rapidly from the upper atmosphere atmosphere aimed directly at the ruined city, the tactical nuclear strike. Now, a nuclear detonation is not just a really big conventional explosion, it is the absolute wrath of the cosmos brought directly down onto Earth. Ground zero reaches temperatures of roughly 100 million degrees Celsius in a fraction of a millisecond. That is literally 4 to 5 times hotter than the center of the literal sun. As the bomb detonates, there is no shockwave to dodge, no air to hold, no concrete to hide behind, and absolutely no cursed energy reinforcement thick or powerful enough to stop it. Yuji's biology, his cursed energy, the air he is breathing, and the very ground he is standing on for miles around are instantaneously, cleanly vaporized at the fundamental atomic level in a blinding silent flash of pure white light. There is no outrunning the flash, and there is absolutely no surviving the heat of a star. It's game over. And there you have it, folks. That is exactly what would happen if Modulo Yuji went toe-to-toe with the full unhinged might of the US military. If you want some more amazing content to feed that anime addiction, by the way, check out this video where I explain what would happen if Modulo Yuji was reborn with all of his past memories. So go check it out. Thank you so much for watching, commenting, and have a good one. Bye-bye!